Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Connecticut Literary Festival's Lit Talks. I'm Joe Thimbarello. I'm the director of the festival and the curator of the Lit Talks series. The Lit Talks is our kind of virtual pandemic programming at the Connecticut Literary Festival. I wish we were going to be at Real Artways. It was going to happen last week on the 10th of October. But we are looking ahead to 2021, and in the meantime, we're offering a virtual program for the entire year. I'm very pleased to help thank our sponsors. The Connecticut Literary Festival is actually housed at Central Connecticut State University in the English department. So thank you to all my colleagues there. Also, Real Artways is a partner, and of course, CT Humanities, that is our financial sponsor of the Lit Talks through the end of the year. So thank you to the CT Humanities, and I want a shout out to them. They just presented their Connecticut Book Awards, and it's a special thing. We are going to collaborate them on with a Lit Talk in December, and we're going to hear from some of the winners of the Book Awards. Tonight, of course, we're happy to welcome poet Marilyn Nelson in a reading and conversation moderated by poet Steve Ostrowski. After this week, our next Lit Talk will be after the election, that election that can't come soon enough, and that'll be on November 12th. I want to read this right. Mexican-American Writers, Imagination and Social Justice. And that'll be moderated by writer Sergio Troncoso. Again, all the Lit Talks are archived on our website. We had Wally Lamb last month, and you can watch all of them on Crowdcast free of charge. So please check that out. Our other exciting news at the Connecticut Literary Festival is last year we received a grant to publish a book. We are going to publish the inaugural Connecticut Literary Anthology. It comes out next month. It's a lovely book. It's at the printer right now, so we'll be talking more about that and having some events. And I do hope if you enjoy tonight in our program, please come back, and thank you for supporting the arts in Connecticut and elsewhere. In tonight's program, you have a chance to participate. Down on the bottom of your screen. It says ask a question down there, and you can type a question. If you're like me, I want to ask a question. Someone's asked a better one. So in this program in Crowdcast, you can vote for someone else's question, and it'll rise to the top. And towards the middle or end of the program tonight, Marilyn will answer some of your questions, and she'll be happy to do that. So again, thank you very much to our sponsors. Thank you to our production supervisor, Christiana Torres. And now please let me introduce Marilyn Nelson and Steve Ostrowski.
Okay, I guess that
you're on.
All right, here we go. Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Ostrowski, and I'm so honored to be moderating this conversation and reading with Marilyn Nelson. And I just want to say a little bit about Marilyn. There's a lot I could say. Her credits might take up the whole hour, but we'll try to keep it concise. She was born in Cleveland, Ohio, to a serviceman and a teacher, and did a lot of moving around as a child from one military base to another. I'm going to ask her, one of my first questions, I'll tip it off now, is going to be about her childhood and memories of her childhood, important moments from her childhood. So we'll get into that in a moment. Her books include My Seneca Village, The Fields of Praise, New and Selected Poems, which was a finalist for the 1998 Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize, the 1997 National Book Award, and the PEN Winship Award. She has also written The Homeplace, which won the 1992 Annisfield-Wolf Award, and was a finalist for the 1991 National Book Award. Some of her honors include the 2019 Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize, a Frost Medal from the Poetry Society of America, a Fulbright Teaching Fellowship, 2 Pushcart Prizes, and the 1990 Connecticut Art Awards, as well as fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. From 2001 to 2006, she served as Poet Laureate of Connecticut. She was also awarded the 2017 NSK Neustadt Prize for Children's Literature, given in recognition of a storied literary career exploring history, race relations, and feminism in America. She's published collections of verse for children and young adults, including Moab Room, American Ace, and Carver, A Life in Poems, among others. And finally, there's more I could say, but I don't want to it's just an incredible list. In 2013, Nelson was elected Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets. So with all that, I'll take a breath. Welcome, Marilyn Nelson. Thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thanks very much, Steve. You forgot the Nobel, didn't you?
I was going to save that for later. I would not be surprised. Something to look forward to. Okay, let's get right down to the questions. And I will ask a series of questions, but the audience knows that they can ask questions, as Jotham just said, and put them into the little box down there, because you may have entirely different kinds of questions, and Marilyn will be gracious enough to answer them for us. Okay, so my first question, Marilyn, tell us a little bit about your childhood, particularly important moments in your early life.
Are you hearing echo that I'm hearing? I don't know what's happening, but I'm hearing.
Yes, I am hearing that a little bit. Christiana behind the scenes can hopefully.
Yes. Well, we'll see. Yes, my father was recalled into the Air Force for after the Second World War for the Korean conflict, and he stayed in the Air Force then for 16 years. So my family, very much a military family, moving once a year, sometimes more than a year. I think once we were any place for longer than a year, and that very shaped my life. I think it's given me some handicaps. I have a hard time remembering people, remembering names, recognizing faces, because people just disappeared, and it was as if they stopped existing. I used to think as a child that, when we moved, people just disappeared. They just were gone. And on the positive side, it meant that my sister and I are 2 years apart. We grew up knowing that there were different regions in the United States, and each region had its own history and used to have its own dialect that's lost now. And learn how to enter a room of strangers and learn how to make ourselves at home. And because our dad was an officer, we grew up in a world in which we were very much respected, and my parents were both had a lot of race pride, and we were insulated, I think, in many ways from the racism that was going on in the public world of the United States of the 50s. Yeah. I don't know, is this echoing, being heard by everybody? If it is, really.
I'm not sure. I'm getting from the backstage that it may be crowdcast that's going through a little problem.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you
Okay.
without.
Yeah, it is glitchy though. I can hear the problem. Well, let's carry on and do the best we can. What or who sparked your interest in poetry?
Oh, I was a reader, and I started reading poetry as a child, and fell in love with poetry very, very early. We had a set of books, which is when I was pregnant with my first child, I found a copy of a set of books called Childcraft, and I'm sure it's still available and it's worth every penny. And I know a lot of poets who were in the 60s and 70s grew up with Childcraft and learned about poetry from that. So I had that, and then my father had saved a couple of poetry anthologies, which I think were textbooks in English classes we had in college, and I lost myself many times reading mostly 19th century romantics. Yeah, and then I found the public library. So, and my father wrote poems sometimes. And what else can I say? I had one teacher in junior high school who introduced me. This was in a segregated school in Fort Worth, Texas. And Miss Jackson introduced me to African American poetry, loaning me her own personal collection, and that was a very important thing.
Yeah, I think many writers will remember a teacher or someone at a critical age that really kind of steered us in the direction of doing something absurd. Okay, you write for children and adults. You write fiction and poetry. Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of questions you're asking when you write, the kinds of things you're interested in exploring, your topics, your obsessions, if you will?
I'm not quite sure what year this book came out, but when my mother died, I did some family research about family history and wrote a book of poems called A Homeplace. And that was a big turning point because it was the first time I had given myself over to researching and writing about history. And that's been the general direction of my writing career ever since I discovered that I love doing historical research, and I love being immersed in a voice that becomes real to me and is knowledgeable enough about a historical period to be able to narrate the story. And I would say that's my doorbell. I'm going to assume it will not ring again. Is that enough of an answer? I'm sorry, I kind of lost that kind of.
That's wonderful. I have lots of other questions, so and I'm sure our audience does too. So you teach, right?
I taught.
You have taught.
Yes.
When you taught, what were your goals and objectives as a teacher, particularly of poetry? What did you want your students to know or be able to do after a course was over?
Oh, I think what I would have been happy to have them able to recognize some elements of the history of broadly, and to recognize what there was about an individual poem they liked that made them like it. And this is really, really profound. To have the doors of perception open. You know, that you read a poem and you see things differently. You see yourself differently. You see abstractions. What is love? You read a poem that you understand. That's more abstract and general. I'd be glad to recognize a sonnet, and if they can tell the difference between a good rhyme and a bad and whether they can identify something as sounds really simple, but it's not. Iambic pentameter. Some people have to be taught how to recognize rhythm in language. So things like
So technical and craft elements as well as opening the doors of perception. I mean, that's, I think that covers the ground. Did teaching influence your writing at all? And I'm not sure how I would answer that question, but I'm curious how you would.
well, I think seeing the kinds of questions students ask of a poem gives you an idea of how to recognize hope in your own poem as you're working on them. I once had a class. I think it was a survey of masterworks of British American literature, in which there was one guy who always asked really stupid questions. You know, I say, okay, I'm reading this poem for you. Are there any questions? And everybody else just sat. They didn't have any questions. And his hand went up. The first half of the semester, I inwardly rolled my eyes. But he would ask things like, is she going up the stairs or down the stairs? Oh, it turned out, first of all, that nobody else in the class knew, and that it was essential to know that piece of information in order to understand the poem. And I don't remember who he was, a long time ago, but I really learned a lot from him, from learning to see the gaps that he saw that I wasn't aware of. So,
You taught at West Point, did you not?
I did one semester.
What was that like?
It was, in retrospect, respect, it was wonderful. It was probably the most moving teaching experience I'd had, because this was in the year 1999, and they were going to be deployed right after they graduated. I was teaching last year students, and I had this real sense of responsibility. What am I giving to them that they can use when they're deployed in Iraq? What? I kept asking them. I felt so self-conscious during that semester. I felt guilty about wasting their time. What are you getting from me? What can I give you? And they would all say, oh, ma'am, we're getting so much from this class. This is really important to us. What was amazing about that semester was that at the same time I was invited to teach a poetry class at West Point, I also received a grant to teach a course anywhere that incorporated the teaching of meditation. So I had this class which began with 5 minutes of silent meditation and required the cadets to meditate 15 or 20 minutes a day outside of class, which was really, their lives were so scheduled. Finding those few minutes was really hard for them. But they kept journals about their meditation experience. And that experience deepened them during the semester. I wrote published an essay about that experience. It was just, I can't say it was so wonderful, but on the other hand, it was horrible because I was suffering so much from just a sense of inadequacy and that I didn't belong there, and that what I was doing was useless for them. So it was a very difficult time, very, very difficult. Yeah.
Wow, that's just profound. And thank you for sharing that. I find that very, very moving.
Excuse me.
Maybe from that we can move to a little bit more of a softball question. Can you talk about some of your favorite writers?
Mm.
And, maybe people we all know, or maybe people we should know, but anything at all, anybody at all.
Well, sort of thing that changes from day to day depending on who you're reading, what your mood is at the time. And I have been reading, well, how do I say it? I like Robert Hayden. I like Rilke. I went through a period of it. I know Edna St. Vincent Millay, Emily Dickinson. I like a lot of poems by Poet Laureate of Connecticut. I like the novels by Dostoevsky that I managed to struggle through. I don't know. I can only give you a completely arbitrary list.
Yeah. Okay. But that's wonderful. We got a taste of your your heroes, maybe. Okay. Do you care to discuss how you go about composing, from, say, the first idea to completion of a work?
I do a lot of research. I've already confessed that I like writing about history. I enjoy historical research, and I find stories that seem to me to be worth telling, and figure out what person or character might be able to tell the story, and what that person is like, what that person's voice is like, and then when I have a sense of the speaker, I kind of unleash the speaker and see where that creation leads me. I have a book about Seneca Village, which was an African American village in Manhattan that was founded in 18. I think it was 1825. And for that, I did a lot of reading about Seneca Village. I saw the census records of the village that had the names of the residents and their addresses and ages and occupations. And I read about what was happening in New York and the United States during any individual year, and used names from the census record and invented what I always think of as puppets. Puppets with the names of the people who lived there, and with the characters, what little I knew about them. This person is a milliner. This person is a laborer. And their ages. And then I put some of the historical stories into their mouths and allowed them to tell history. And it, I love doing that. I have for that book. There's one character who is an older woman who was described in the census records as a widow, and I made her describe. I assumed that an African American village in New York would be a stop on the Underground Railroad, and so I made this woman describe something about the Underground Railroad. And I don't know, you invent these puppets and you fall in love with them. They feel almost real, almost as if you're communicating, as if you're bringing back a voice that died a couple hundred years ago and allowing that voice to speak again.
Okay, thank you. I think it's time that we're going to ask you to read to us from your, vast array of choices. But the technician wants me to tell you that they're going to try something. They're going to try to kick you into the audience. That's their word, and then bring you back and see if that works. So you can maybe look at what you want to read while you, I guess, disappear from the screen for a second, and then hopefully you'll be ready.
Okay. Okay. Let me get some more wine. I'll be right back.
Okay. We are working on a slightly technical difficulty, but this is a good time if you have questions that you want to ask Marilyn about anything further that you heard. You want to follow up on anything or talk more about other things that she has written. We haven't really talked much about the young adult stuff. Maybe there's a question there. Well, here she is back. Okay, Marilyn, please take it away, and we'd love to hear you read.
Okay. I have a cat who is very distant whenever I'm at the computer. I'm sorry. If I put him down, he yowls. Go away, Leah. Go on. Get down. Get down. Good boy. Okay, I thought I would start with a poem that's not one of mine. This is a poem by our friend Leslie McGrath, who passed away rather suddenly and unexpectedly just a few weeks ago. She was the author, I think, 3 books, really a very talented poet, and a poet who gave a lot of her energy to the poetry world of the wider poetry world, but also the poetry world of the States. And I'm going to read a poem from her book, Opulent Hunger, Opulent Rage. I'll read it first and then talk a bit about why I'm reading it. It's called Orphan. Because it is a wild thing and will not come to us, Bill pulls the dinghy from its slip in a barn and carries it to the vernal pond, stepping over a rune of feathers at its edge, launching himself with a pair of oars and a slice of wheat bread, calling to it the awkward yellow gosling orphaned by a neighbor's truck and the press of time. 90,000 dead in China's awful shudders, 100,000 lost in Burma, as we call across stagnant water in the rising dusk of a Connecticut farm to a closer suffering which will not answer because it is a wild thing and should not come to us. And I read this poem because I've been thinking a lot about all the thousands of people in our country and the rest of the world who are dying of this virus and dying because of death, and how unaccountable those are. How can you mourn 100,000 people? But this poem reduces that empathy to the small gesture of empathy involved in trying to rescue an one orphaned child. We may not be able to comprehend the 90,000 dead in China's awful shudder, or the 100,000 lost in Burma, but we can call to what Leslie calls the closer suffering, the smaller suffering. And that is something that means something. And I think I really love the directness and simplicity of that poem. So that again is from Leslie McGrath's book, Opulent Hunger, Opulent Rage. So, my own poem, I'm going to start with the poem I mentioned in our conversation, Steve. This is from this book about Seneca Village. The book is called My Seneca Village. And this is the puppet here. Her name is Nancy Morris, widow, approximately 1838. The poem is called Conductor. When did my knees learn how to forecast rain and my hairbrush start yielding silver curls? Of late, a short walk makes me short of breath, and every day begins and ends with pain. Just yesterday, I was raising my girls. Now I'm alone and making friends with death. So let the railroad stop at my back door for a hot meal. What do I have to lose? The Lord has counted the hairs on my head and made a little space under my floor. All I ask of life is to be of use. There'll be time to be careful when I'm dead. Birth is a one-way ticket to the grave. I've learned that much slowly over the years, watching my body age. Time is a thief, and what we give away is all we can save. So bring on the runaways. I know no fear. Let life have meaning if it must be brief. So again, that was a puppet of a voice of history speaking as a puppet. I thought I'd read some Connecticut poems. Let me not read too long. Look at my. I am reading from a little book called The Meeting House, which was written to celebrate the 350th anniversary of the founding of First Congregational Church of Old Lyme. And I want to read several poems because I had a conversation earlier today with one of the ministers of that church about a program, a Connecticut program called Witness Stones, in which Connecticut towns are researching their history and finding the names of people who were held as slaves in these towns. And their information is being engraved on brass plaques put on stones, which will be set in the ground in these towns. I think it started in West Hartford and in Guilford. And I think this is just a wonderful gesture. And a lot of the towns are using using school kids to do the research. to find the names. And it's in the same way that we're saying, say their names, say the name of George Floyd, say their name. Now say the name of people who were held, kidnapped and held as slaves in the house next door to us, 200 years ago. So I'll read some of these poems. This is called The Meeting House, Lyme, Connecticut, 1666. These are sounds the landscape has never heard. A strange human language, axes and saws, iron hammers pounding home iron nails, the tromp of boots, the cough of musket fire. Sighing, the old growth trees crash to the ground, opening a blue vista. Distant sails scud on the wind, silent as butterflies. Englishmen are building a meeting house, a container for worship, a refuge from the new world of heathen savages. Called by the savage drummer at the door, men in black breeches, fitted coats, white stockings, and white collars, and women in long, sad-colored dresses and bonnets arrive by horseback or on foot. Armed guards nod welcome. Through the greased paper windows comes light never before caught in plank wall. They sit divided by the center aisle. The left side, men, the right, women and girls. Boys in the back with the servants and slaves. This is called Me, Jane. It's based on a deed of sale. Lyme, Connecticut, 1729. Two members in good standing of the church record and sign a business transaction. In consideration of the sum of 25 pounds, one mulatto girl of 3 years old called Jane to have and hold, possess and enjoy as his own proper estate forever during her natural life. Two members who have seats in the front pew. There's a part of Lyme, Connecticut that's called Black Point. It's a very fancy community. It's a location you want to have an address at because it means your property is valuable. So this is about the history of Black Point. It's called Black Point Preserve. The minister involved here was Reverend Jonathan Parson, who was the minister of First Congregational Church from 1730 to 1745. Of the 30 tribal families still in town eking out a living on, Of the 30 tribal families still in town eking out a living on shrinking land with no clear boundaries for their reserve at Black Point, and alcohol medicine. Some of them seem desirous of learning, writes the young minister with his quill pen. God willing, he'll lead them out of darkness. Excuse me. He's urged them to join the public worship in God's house. Some come, sit in the last pew, and stare out of brown faces with black eyes as he reads from the gospel or preaches. He's writing a petition for a school to bring more of the heathen to know Christ. His suggestion, when it is introduced to the Council of Nyantic Sages, provokes many snorts of bitter laughter. The Nyantic were a tribe. I'm sorry, I don't use my voice very much. I only talk to cats usually. So whenever I speak, try to project. I cough. Let's see. I'll just read two more from this. This one is called Warwick. The name, well, it'll be clear to you. The only note that might be useful is that I found the word Ngombe, which is a Swahili word for cow. Warwick. Mary Noy Ely, last will testament, Lyme, Connecticut, 1769. Twice widowed Mary Ely, 64, being sound of both mind and memory, writes, my Negro Warwick shall be free after I decease, to be his own man to all intents and purposes whatsoever. Left to her in her second husband's will, Warwick has served Mistress Ely for 40 years, faithful as a shadow, her trusted friend. But then the Ngombe lives to be 88. And this is the last poem I'll read from this Meeting House book. This one is in the voice of a, I hope it's clear, a woman who was enslaved in this town. One of the claims to fame of Lyme is that George Washington passed through Lyme on April 10, 1776, with the Continental Army. Okay. As I lifted the kettle from the hob, I heard the sound of drums from far away. I paused a moment. Then that hot water got heavy, but I listened while I worked. A steady rhythm, now and then a voice. I washed, wiped, and put the dishes away, then dried my hands and hung up the dish rag. Now I heard beats and many men's boots. I took my shawl and stepped out in the dusk. Out front, a white man, golden shoulders and a sandy pigtail, sat a gray horse as if they were one being longing to prance. Most of the town was lined along the street, clapping and cheering. A white army marched, black-booted feet in perfect unison toward the church, in identical top hats, white sashes, blue coats with silver buttons, fawn waistcoats and breeches, and knee-high boots. They carried muskets fitted with bayonets. Never had I seen such terrible power. They marched to the cadence the drummer set. Left, right, left, right, left, right, for many. Some of us gathered behind McCurdy's house, whispering we had heard and understood of all this. Zacchaeus swore he saw some brothers among the soldiers. The drummer they marched to brought up fear. We stood silent when we saw his dark face. This one is important to me because I grew up in a military family, surrounded not with many of them, but still with family friends who had been Tuskegee Airmen and who had committed themselves to living and dying possibly for this country. And the fact that the drummer who's playing the case of the entire Continental Army is black is my decision. But it's important to me that he's there. Do I have enough?
Wow.
I don't know if is that enough?
The technician tells me that if we want to get to, can you hear me?
Yes.
The technician tells me we're running low on time and that if we wanted to ask the audience question, do you mind answering a question or two? I just want to say though that even though there's technological problems here tonight, that your power is coming through that. Like it just blazes right through the glitches and yeah, it really does. Okay, here's a question. Many writers are not good readers of their own work, but you are, Marilyn. Talk about reading versus hearing poetry.
Two things. First, I don't want to forget to thank the Connecticut Center of the Book and Real Art Way, Connecticut Humanities, before I go on further, and the other groups who supported this festival. I don't want to run out of time to say that. I think Robert Frost talked about sentence rhythms in poems. I think too many people forget about that. And then, I mean, you have to read, a poem is made up of sentences, and you have to read the sentences as if they mean something. And so that's the first thing. And the second thing I can say about that is that my sister has, in the theater her career, has been as an actor and director. And when I first started seriously writing and would take my poems home and read them to my mother and my sister. My sister said, "Why do poets always sound like poets when they read?" So I worked really hard to sound more like an actor than like a poet. Yeah. It used to be that poets, when I first started writing, there was only one MFA program in the country, was at Iowa. And
Yep.
so all of the famous poets had gone to Iowa, and they all read in the same way. They ended a poem on a high note instead of on a low declare. So the poem ended up there in the air. And
Yeah.
I think that's how my sister was reacting.
I think that style still exists for sure.
Does it?
I think so. I've been to readings where I guess you can call it the Iowa influence. Okay, how about one more question?
Hmm.
Why does poetry matter in the 21st century?
Why does art matter? Why does creativity matter? Why does imagination matter? These are ways that we express what I think is the highest aspiration of human experience. And these are ways we try to make our brief existence last beyond us. We try. What does it mean to make a petroglyph on a cliff wall? What does it mean to paint a buffalo on a cave wall? What does it mean to create a song that can't be forgotten?
Wow.
I love the traditions of people. There are some Native American traditions in which you go on a vision quest, and what you come back is a song, your song, and it's only yours. Doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And if you're generous, you care about the people around you, you teach them your song, and then the song has a life beyond you. I think poetry is something like that. Yeah. Is that time warning?
Well, we're at 58 minutes, so I think we got 60 minutes. So
Okay.
I think that was a great way to end, though. What a beautiful answer. The poem is song that you put out there, and that outlives the singer. Well, I just want to thank you, Marilyn. I found this evening very enlightening and inspirational, and I know I speak for everybody. And we thank you for being part of this festival. We thank you for being part of Connecticut. We thank you for being part of the poetry world. And
Thank you, Sue.
wish you nothing but the best going forward. Oh, listen, there's 30 seconds. What are you working on now? I meant to ask you that. What's next?
I have a book that just came out this week. It's
Oh,
called
congratulations.
Leviathan's Quiet Roar. It's about a girl who is an introvert and an artist, and whose artwork becomes an expression of human rights, dignity, even though she's a little girl, she didn't have that in mind. She's just making kid art, but her art turns out to be taken as an expression of the great aspirations for freedom and living the climate and peace. And
Wow, that sounds wonderful. That sounds really wonderful.
I'm with it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming and for listening, and apologies for the glitchiness. I don't know what causes that, but we're in a technological age where certain things are beyond our control. But I hope you found it as powerful and as moving as I did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Okay. We'll
Be
see.
well. Be well.
You too.
Be well.
You too.
Careful. Everyone. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Stephen.
Oh, thank you, Marilyn. I really appreciate this. Okay. I'm not sure what happens now.